daven.
I wish I would have.
Yeah. So when we finished the Torah Or, at the end we sort of went through it quickly, but I told you we should go over the allusions that he gives here a little bit more in depth. So we brought the
Stop.
the last paragraph. הנה כתיב בנהר יעבור ורגל שם נשמחה בו. Yeah, anyway.
I don't see that. Samach based. I'm still shaking from the shower.
This paragraph.
That's Ketiv.
Yeah.
I get so confused with Rosh.
It's not a Rosh Tevis.
What is it?
It's just a shortening. It's a shorthand.
That's a Rosh Tevis, no?
So, Rosh Tevis is if you have more than one, and then...
okay. Abbreviation.
It's an abbreviation.
Okay.
והנה כתיב, ונהר יעבור ורגל שם נשמחה בו. So we saw this pasuk from Tehillim, chapter 66. That in the future, in the same way that God split the sea when we came out of Egypt to receive the Torah, to receive the revealed Torah, in the same way, He will split the river, and we'll pass through the river in order to receive... Right. And we'll receive... so that's one explanation. It's Prat, again, it doesn't matter which river it is, because it's a metaphor.
I don't even know where the Euphrates is anyway, except that it's somewhere
in Iraq. And it goes all the way down to the Persian Gulf. But the important part of the Euphrates is not down there. Nobody cares. The important part of the Euphrates is in Turkey, and northern Syria.
I've crossed it.
Northern Syria.
I've crossed it, I think.
Could be. It's a very long river.
In Istanbul.
No, it doesn't go all the way.
Doesn't go that far?
No, that's something else. That's the Dardanelles. In any case, and so it's talking about a metaphoric river. It's not really concerned about this river or that river. And what does it mean that the river will be crossed? So obviously, the big difference is that when you part the sea, you're parting the infinite. Okay? We talked a little bit about this already. So we said that when you're parting the sea, you're parting something that's infinite, you're parting all of creation. That's why we talked about this medrash. It says that all the waters in the world were split when the sea was split. And again, I told you that's medrash. It means that you should understand that everything that represents infinity was split open, and they saw something. They saw something on the other side. They realized it was something on the other side. But splitting the river means something entirely different. It's a completely different image, because a river does not feel like infinity. And a river feels like finite. So a river is more...
usually you can see the other side of the river.
But the idea is...
the Yam Suf was also a river.
No, it was a river. It's called the Yam because it's a Yam. Exactly how big this Yam was, I don't know, but it was connected to all the Yamot. So it's not a lake. It's not like, there's a lot of people who want to say it was a little lake that they crossed. Something like that. No, it's the Red Sea. The sea that you see, like where you know that the Red Sea is, that's where they crossed. How it was inland, it was this, it was that, it doesn't matter.
It's connected to the Nile? It's where the Nile goes out to?
The Nile doesn't connect to the Red Sea at all. It goes parallel to it. Because the Red Sea has an inlet that goes up on the west side of the Sinai Peninsula. It's called the peninsula because on both sides of it, it has a sea, and it's called the Red Sea. So the Nile is parallel to the west inlet, the western inlet, and the Nile it goes to the Mediterranean. The Red Sea does not connect to the Mediterranean. But by the way, that's a big deal. It's one of the few places in the world that you really get the Holy Land, the land of Israel, is one of the only places, I don't know if there's another place like this in the entire world, where you get the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean cut off by land. Because the Red Sea is a part of the Indian Ocean, and the Mediterranean Sea is part of the Atlantic. And there's an argument to be made that the Indian Ocean is just a part of the Pacific. So really, this small part of land here, the Sinai and the land of Israel, because the eastern inlet goes all the way up to Eilat. So if you cut a straight line, it's also almost like saying that the land of Israel is between east and west oceans. It's really the only part, I think, of that really cuts them off. You know, if you go down to Cape Town, you know, in the Horn of the so-called Horn of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So it also, in a sense, it has the Indian Ocean on one side and the Atlantic on the other, but it doesn't cut them off because between Africa and Antarctica there's open waters, open ocean. So there's no cutoff. It doesn't really disconnect them. This, I think, is the only place in the world, you need to check this, but it's the only place in the world that really cuts off two oceans from one another. In this case, the Mediterranean and the Atlantic from the Red Sea and the Indian. What's the idea here? So that's the ocean. The ocean is called in the Gemara Mayim She'en Lehem Sof, waters without end. So it's always a symbol of the infinite. Whenever we want to discuss in the revealed Torah something that has to do with the infinite, we'll talk about the ocean. It gives us a good idea of what the infinite is about. The river, on the other hand, is something completely different. We understand what a river is. A river is drawing down. It's taking water from a high place to a low place. Basically, that's what a river does. And it'll always flow down. It can't flow up. It's very hard for it to flow up, even though in some places it looks like it, but it's just an illusion. So a river really symbolizes a different aspect of water. So the two aspects are that the Torah, since Torah is likened to water, so there are two aspects in Torah. One is that it's infinite, and the other one is that it draws down, that it comes down from above. So whenever you want to say that it comes down from above, you're talking about a river. Whenever you're talking about the Torah being infinite, the metaphor will be an ocean. So here we have that before the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, the infinite was split, meaning that we're talking about bringing down the infinite aspect of Torah. The infinite nature in reality had to be split, so that we could reveal, the Torah could be revealed. When you're talking about the Mashiach coming, it's something different. It's about the fact that Torah is drawn down into reality that's split. So something else is going on. What does that mean? It means that Torah will somehow no longer be flowing from above to below. You follow? How is it going to flow then? It's going to flow backwards. Meaning,
that's a good trick.
Okay, it's not going. Basically, when Joshua crossed the Jordan, what did they see? They saw the river flowing backwards. What does it mean that it flows backwards?
That was Joshua drove it back so that they could cross it.
Okay. But here you'll have 7 pillars like this. So what did they see then? It says that the water stopped. They couldn't go back uphill. They can't do that. So they do something more amazing. They go up as like a pipe going up. Again, whether this happened, didn't happen, I don't know. This is in the prophet. So in the prophet, you can always say that this was something that was seen in prophecy. I don't know if you have to say that it was literal. I have no idea. I really don't know. I can accept, if you need to accept that, if you have to believe that this is what happened, I believe that it can happen. That's not the issue. The question is, what does it symbolize? And the symbol here is that water is coming from below to above. It's a new thing. So really, what does this represent? It represents the way that the world is now, as opposed to how the world will be when the Mashiach comes. The order of things now is that the neshama brings the Torah down to the body. It's the neshama that tells the body, the soul tells the body how it should act. So it's coming from above to below. The revelation of Torah is understood by the soul.
Didn't bring the neshama down. The neshama came down from Hashem.
All the more so. The neshama is coming from above to below.
But it wasn't a request of the body. It wasn't. The body didn't go.
Of course not.
The neshama.
Of course not. That's why we say that the soul came down to teach the body. That's what we say, that the soul doesn't need anything in this world. It doesn't stand to gain, as it were. Okay? It has all it needs. The body doesn't. So the soul does the body a favor and it comes down. And for 70, 120 years, it leads the body in the right way. And because of that, matter is rectified. matter reaches a new level. The world is made into a better place. The physical world is made into a better place. But the order in the time of Mashiach will be reversed. That it's not the soul that will instruct the body, but rather the body will instruct the soul. The Torah wants.
What does the body have to give to the
Oh,
soul?
great question. So there's a simple answer and there's a more complex answer. I'll say the simple answer in a second. But again, the idea is that you reverse the flow of Torah. The Torah is not going to come from above to below in the person, from the soul into the body, the soul normalizing, instructing the body how to conduct itself. That's the revealed Torah. But rather, the soul came down to hear secrets from the body. And that's the concealed Torah. The concealed Torah is really feminine, we call it, because it has more to do with the body. The feminine is associated with the body, the masculine is associated with the soul. So right now it's called the masculine, or patriarchal, in the sense that the masculine tells the feminine what to do. But in the future, the masculine is going to be listening to the feminine. Shema bekola, like it says by Avram. Listen to her. And you'll hear all the secrets of creation. So what does this mean? It means that creation is not going to be split apart. It's not the creation that's going to be split apart. It's not the waters that are going to be split apart. But rather, the waters are going to flow upstream. They're split apart not for the splitting, not to reveal something, but rather to flow in a different direction. It causes them to flow in a different direction. So what does that mean? What it simply means is, for instance, Olive Chassidus, for instance, is looking at, well, not exaggerate, not all. A lot of Chassidus is looking at the world and learning Torah from it. That's one of the big chidushim. That says the Baal Shem Tov, everything that you look at is a lesson in something. What do you mean it's a lesson in something? Since when do you learn from lessons from reality? Reality is crooked, it's broken. Why would I want to learn something from reality? He says, no, we're in a different state now. The state now is such that we know how to learn from reality. We're in a different state. That's called nekevat sovev gaver. That the feminine will guide the masculine. The feminine is reality, the world. And it can teach you the lessons. If you're not very smart, you won't get it. And that's something that the Alter Rebbe, for instance, said many times. That in relation to his wife, I like quoting this because it's a great quote. He says that whatever his wife said, he heard the word of God. And he heard Hashem speaking. Why? Because it says, V'hu yimshol bach. He will, meaning man, will rule you, the woman. But in a reversal of interpretation, he says, it means that the man has to hear the parable of what his wife is saying. Meaning that she's speaking about the things, the regular things she's speaking about. But if you have eyes, ears to listen, then you will hear that everything she's saying is a lesson. Everything is a parable. And you have to learn how to limshol bach, how to do the mashal, how to build the parable properly out of what she's saying. And if you understand what she's saying, then you'll learn something from it. Something that the neshama couldn't learn in any other way. There was no other way to learn it. So, no.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a tremendous switch. Or again, this is the basics of what's hiding behind these two images, of the sea being split and the river being split. Okay. And now let's see at the end. After the sea was split, it says that in the future, we saw that in our epoch, in our times, you can't have real joy. Why? Because joy is when there's true revelation. Right now, the body is still concealing. That's why he says there's no joy, because there's only faith. It's very interesting what you're saying. It says this, neshama has faith. But revelation, when you talk about revelation, revelation has to be physical. If it's not physical, it's not real revelation in the end. In other words, the fact that I can understand the parable and I can understand what it means and so on and so forth, said that there's a few people in the world who get off on this. They love this stuff, like me, and they like taking apart every parable and think about what it means and this and that. But you go to a regular guy in the street and you try to explain to him a parable, so he may find it interesting if you're really catchy in the way you talk and you're a great orator and whatever. After 10 minutes he'll forget it. It doesn't mean anything to him. It just doesn't mean anything. Because that's not his world, that's not where his mindset is. He's far more physically oriented and far too ingrained in the body and the physical structure of the world to understand and enjoy and really take to heart something that is spiritual. It won't connect to it. Again, that's why you can get these short WhatsApps every 5 minutes. And people will read them. If they're longer than a minute, they won't read them or they won't listen to them. And you can send 1 million of these every day. And you know what? You can send the same thing the next day. And they'll never know. Because it goes in through here, it registers for a second, and it goes out through there. Because they're just too coarse. That's not where they are. But show them something physical. They won't forget it so easily. Something physical, if you can actually show it. Not explain it, but actually show it. I was thinking about if we want to learn the name of 72 letters, which we want to learn. So I can say there's 3 verses. Each one of them has 72 letters. Right now I lost 50% of the people. 72, what does that mean in the world? What's 72? 72 for most people is an abstract concept that doesn't mean anything. They can't even think of putting 72 coins in a row. They can't even think of $72. If you show them $72, they'll understand there's $72 here. But they can't imagine it beforehand. They can't see themselves in their mind's eye counting $72. When they think I'm going to be a millionaire, what do they think? The most they can think of, on my bank account, it'll say 1 million. But they can't imagine what that actually means. They can't. It's just impossible for them. 50% of the people can't do that. I'm not talking about 50% of the people in the world. 90% of the people in the world don't understand what the number 72 means. I'm not kidding. This is not, I'm saying this from studies that have been done. Can you show me 72 things in anywhere in your house? Most people don't have 72 of anything. They don't have 72 underwear. They don't have 72 socks. They don't have 72 dishes. So when have they seen 72? There's a book. The book has 72 pages.
No, we have 72 different stories.
But the pages don't mean anything in the regular world. Who cares? What's the difference between page 8 and page 73? Who cares? No one cares. It's meaningless. It's insignificant. But you tell a Jew, Daf Chet, page 8 in Shabbos, and you tell him page 72 in Shabbos, 2 different worlds. Here we're talking about this, there we're talking about that. This sugya, there's a famous Ktsosan, and this sugya, there's a famous Chidush Ariman, and every person has his own favorite thing to say about 8 and 72 in that book. Okay? Because that's how a Jew works. But still, even that's so you got out of all the Jews, how many people can do that? 5%, maybe, probably closer to 0.5%. And then you lost them. So I say there's 3 verses, they each have 72 letters. What do you mean? So what? Verses have, no, they're all consecutive. They're one after another in the Torah. So what? Is that common, not common? He doesn't know. He can't appreciate it. But now I make it even more difficult. I say the way you construct these 72 names is you take the first letter from the first verse, the last letter from the second verse, and the first letter from the third verse. Now you've lost another 50%. They don't know what I'm talking about. Now you got to do the second letter from the first verse, second to last letter from the second verse, second letter from the third verse. I can't even say it. I can see it, but I can't say it. So you lose people right away, and then you show them the chart. You show them the chart so they completely lose you. They don't know what you want. What is this? It's a bunch of mumbo jumbo. It's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. So I show them this chart. Where's the chart? And we had like 70 different times this chart. Here it is. And I showed them this chart. This is the chart of the 72 names. And they look at this like you're looking at it now. As we say in Hebrew, no offense. Right? That's how my father used to call it. Whenever I showed him these things. I'm looking at it like a donkey looks at some gourmet meal. What do you want from me? I don't know what you're talking about. Aye, but if I could show you that each one of these names does something. Oh, look, you say this name, whoop, you get a little dancing goat. That's interesting. And that's already interesting. Dancing goats I like. Okay. If I could look at this and tell you which stock is going up tomorrow. So you'd be interested. That you understand. That people understand. So unfortunately, when you say something physical, everybody understands. When you say something spiritual, nobody understands. So because nobody understands, so what did...
That's why I tell stories to everybody.
Right. Because people understand stories. And there's a moral behind it, and there's an idea behind it, this and that. You gain something. It's an old trick.
Often people take on a story.
Okay.
Not always, but often people take on a story.
Okay. So this has been the trouble with spirituality since the beginning. Which is, if you want to make it for the elites, and the few smart people in the world will enjoy it and become, I don't have to say they'll be physically any better, because we know that most of them weren't, but at least intellectually they'll be higher, on a higher plane. So you can build what they had in Greece, later in Rome, and it was even more highlighted, that there was this philosopher class, and these people, they sit in their ivory tower, and they live there. They're very happy with what they know, and they're close to godliness and this and that, or whatever they think it is. Then there came this idea that the Yiddishkeit, it's a very strange idea, and it said that everybody should be able to understand this. Everybody should be able to enjoy this, and everybody should be elevated by it. Everybody should change because of it. It should be something that belongs to the masses. It's real democracy of knowledge, everything. And then you come across the question of how do you spread this to people who at most are market peddlers? How do you get them to understand something so spiritually high and difficult and ephemeral?
You sound like a Litvak.
What?
You sound like a Litvak.
What do you mean?
That's what the Litvak said against
You can't.
the Emperor.
You can't. Right?
So they said you throw the Emperor away.
So Yiddishkeit started with this great ideal that we're going to teach everybody. There's going to be a whole nation of people who are spiritual. And not just market peddlers, not just peddlers in the marketplace. But it's a really tough thing to do, and I don't think that there was ever any great success with it. So we talked about it. I think the prophets maybe got to 1/2% of the people, maybe. It wasn't very successful. I mean, we needed prophecy, but it didn't work very well as an educational tool. And then you have a really big breakthrough was writing the Mishnah and the Talmud and everything that we call the oral tradition. It was really a big breakthrough because it expanded the number of people who were dealing with these questions, with spirituality, with these, and not, again, spirituality doesn't have to be something spiritual, it could be just law. Even law is spiritual in a certain sense. But they were dealing with these questions of the mind rather than questions of the body. A lot more of people. It was much more open, became far more egalitarian. But still, I don't think ever it crossed the 1%. The 1% of the people, of the Jewish people, were engaged in Torah at any serious intellectual level. So it was a good step forward, but it didn't really break any barriers.
Some barriers.
Okay. So eventually, what the Zohar says is this is not going to change until people can understand this from the physical. When they will see this in their day-to-day conduct with their body, then they'll understand it. Then they will understand why this is serious. Then they'll understand how you can rise to a whole new level of existence. But until it doesn't become physical, it doesn't become something that you need in the same way that you understand. Everybody understands that they need to eat. Everybody understands that they need to drink. Everybody understands that they need to sleep. Everybody understands these physical things, these physical needs. Until you don't break that, until you don't bring things down that low, it won't catch on. It's not really going to be useful. Yes, there's going to be times, periods in the history of the world that people they have a lot more quiet, a lot more calm, things are better, and they'll have time to engage in higher thought, and they'll come to things, but still will be a small percentage of the population. To really make it work, it has to be what the Zohar calls the parnesun mineh. The person has to feel that this is just as important and crucial to his life as is his parnasa, as is his livelihood. If that's not how it is, then forget it. It's not going to work. You're never going to get to everything. So you want an elite that knows how to learn and how to engage in thought and how to touch God, who is more thought than he is action in a certain sense. Then yes, go ahead. You can build whatever kind of society you want with an elite like that. It's sort of what exists in most of the Western world today, where you have people who are educated in universities and people who aren't. And the vast amount of people don't have a doctorate. I'm not going to call a BA having a bachelor's degree, knowing how to think yet. But when you get to the level of a doctorate, you say something he must have learned. He's been there for 8-9 years. He must have learned something about how to study, how to think. So if you get, I think in America, which I think has the highest rate of doctorates per capita, I think it's 0.01% of the population, 0.001, I don't remember. It's either 100th or 1,000th of a percent of the population has them. I think the number is 400 out of 100,000 people, something like that. No, out of 1 million people. So it's 0.01. So that's not a big success. You see, but look at it. Look at what happens when you have that much. You get a superpower of immense proportions that you've never seen before. America isn't what it is because of its military. It's not what it is because of its great government. It's not what it is of any of these things. It's what it is because of its higher education. It has the biggest network of higher education in the world. It has the highest per capita doctorates in the world. That's what makes you into a power. So now imagine that instead of studying, I don't know, Cicero, which might actually have some value, and instead of studying some anthropology, which I don't know how much value it brings, imagine that you had even 1% of the population, or 1/100% of the population here in Eretz Yisrael that had a doctorate level in Torah. You would be a superpower intellectually. You would be a superpower in terms of ethics, in terms of moral, in terms of everything, of conduct. Just that would turn you into something that everybody in the world would look like. Now imagine if you get that up to 10% of the population. Imagine if you get that up to 90% of the population. So I'm saying that the only way to do this is if you actually can bring it down to the physical matter. If you can show it in the physical matter, then the body teaches the soul. Maybe I don't need that. I do, but at some level maybe I don't. Maybe I've learned, because I've learned with the best, I've learned how to, from my soul, teach my body. Although I don't always keep it, but in principle I know how it works. But the other 99.9% of the population can't do that. So it has to turn into this river that's going up. It's flowing backwards. And so the Torah will come from the body. That's what's explained. That's how the Rebbe explains it. That's how Levi Yitzchak explains it. Everybody who knows anything about these things, that's how they explain it. That in the end, Atida neshama shetekebel min haguf. That's what it's called. That the soul will, in the end, receive from the body. And what's the difference? That when it's from the soul, it's called faith. But when it's from the body, it's called joy. Mm-hmm. Suddenly you have joy. Because joy you feel in the body. It's something else. It's not some spiritual vague thing, faith. Faith is very powerful, but few people can really live with it. But joy, everybody understands. Ki simcha poretzet gvulot. When you say that, even when you say that, what do you mean? That joy breaks down barriers. You mean that in the world of barriers, in the physical world, which is full of limits, joy is the expression of the infinite. So when the infinite comes out of the finite, it's called joy. And so he says that he can't have this in our time because mechamat is still a goof, because the body is still too coarse. It hides, it conceals the teachings that it has. But in the future, when there won't be any more death, meaning that the limit will be broken, the body will be the body, but it won't be limited, then then you'll see eye to eye. And seeing eye to eye, we said, is you'll see the infinite and the finite, the concealed and the revealed together. And he says why? Because in the future, he's going to split the river into 7 parts. And the idea, again, of the river, the Nachal in general, is, and he says Nechalim, seven rivers, Nechalim, streams. We'll see why in a second, but he says this is the breaking of the physical world in such a way that the physical will teach the spiritual. Why the Nachal? Why not say Nahar? In the first verse he said Banahar Yavru Veragil. And now he says when it's broken down to Nechalim, into streams. So we have the river and the streams. They're smaller. But it's not just that. It's also that in the second time that Moshe Rabbeinu describes, that's for next week. So the first time that Moshe Rabbeinu describes the 10 Commandments, it has 620 letters. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, what we're going to read next week, has 620. The second time has 708. Okay? 88 letters more. So in Kabbalah it's explained, here's something that if you don't like counting, you wouldn't discover. You have 620 in the first 10 Commandments in Parshas Yitro, and then you have 708 in Parshas V'etchana.
What's the extra?
Extra. There's more words. They're not exactly the same. It adds some things. It adds some words. What are these 88 letters? Where did they come from? So they searched for it. And what did they discover? They discovered that the first time that he describes in Yitro, when we hear how the mountain was, we just hear about the mountain. But in V'etchanan, in Deuteronomy, the second time that the 10 Commandments, the giving of the Torah, is described, then suddenly Moshe Rabbeinu has a new feature to add that he didn't describe the first time. And he says there was a stream coming down the mountain. V'nachal yored mehar Sinai. And Nachal, Nun Chet Lamed, is equal to 88. So they explain that these extra 88 letters, they are the image, they relate to the image of the stream that Moshe Rabbeinu describes, that also came down. So a stream, what's the difference between the first 10 commandments and the second? The first account and the second account? The first account is usually considered to be Torah Shebichtav, the written tradition. And the second account is the oral tradition, the Torah Sheba'al Peh. In the Torah Sheba'al Peh, there's an extra 88 letters. What's the idea? The point is, again, not that there's extra letters. That's superfluous. That wouldn't be the right interpretation. The right interpretation is that whenever you encounter a stream, it's a sign of going from below to above. It's another one of these signs, like the oral tradition, that it's us innovating in the Torah, that it's us revealing something new. Okay, so that's the Nachal here. So we don't have much time. We'll try to say something still. At the very end, now I'm going mamash to the end of the, because then he talks about Moshe. והנה אחר שנתעלו בני ישראל לבחינה זו, לא רצו ליסע משם. ממש the end. We said that after they had seen with belief, not with their own eyes yet, but with belief, they saw that there was the concealed reality behind the revealed reality. They didn't want to depart. It's like a person who's seeing a tremendous vision, and he says, I'm in...
Well, Rashi explains that differently. Rashi says because they were collecting the gold.
No, same thing. Gold, as we know, is not for this reality. Gold or whatever it is. Again, the whole picture of Yatzum Sham Yeruchush Gadol, that they'll come out with great treasures. So if you're coarse and physical and this and that, then you say they were all millionaires. They all had millions, but you see from the descriptions that the sages give.
To do with it if you do accept that, because there was nothing to spend.
Right, in the desert, what are you gonna do? Yeah, thanks. It's like finding Confederate dollars. Nothing to do with it. It's $1 million in Confederate dollars. Not worth anything. Or
I didn't know they were Confederate dollars.
finding 50 billion Deutschmarks.
The Confederates printed their own money?
Yeah, they had their own money, and there's always the joke that somebody finds, there's a big treasure, and you hunt for it for years, and finally you find it. It says it's millions of dollars, and you finally open it up. And what do you find? That it's Confederate dollars, which are worthless.
Even as for what's it called? Collectors?
Yeah, there's plenty of them. Who cares? Nobody cares. It's like a gulot. It's like, oh, I have an old gulot from 40 years ago. Who cares? It's paper. It's not even worth it. It's not even good paper for burning. This isn't that bad. So the idea is that if you're very coarse and you're not spiritual, so what you understand that what the Gemara describes it even, it makes you even laugh when you hear it. Every Jew left with 80 Ludite, meaning Libyan donkeys, stuffed with gold and treasure from Bizat Hayam, from the spoils of the sea. It's kind of sad. You were in Egypt for 210 years. You gave your children. It's like people who, if you would say, to a Holocaust survivor, right? But you got the money afterwards. You got a stipend. So if you say that, and there's coarse people that will say that. You hear how stupid that is. You hear how inhuman that is. You hear how that's missing the whole point. And that's why a lot of Jews didn't want to take money from them, because they said it's so incommensurate. There's you can't compare it to anything. So the same thing here. What are you really serious? That's what they were looking for gold. That was their retribution. That made up for all their years in Egypt. That's nonsense. What do the sages want to say? They want to say, I know, for a simple person to explain to them how incredible it was what they received after being in Egypt, how incredible this spiritual revelation was. The only way I can explain it to you, you coarse person, unfortunately, this is the only language you understand, is to tell you that it's 80 Libyan donkeys filled with gold, carrying. Okay. What is it really? It's the same story. There's a lot of people, they look for these treasures, and in the end they discover something spiritual, and they tear it up and throw it out. Who cares? This book? What are you talking about? What's a book worth? They don't understand. It's showing, again, a gourmet meal to a donkey. They don't get it. So he says, yes, it's the same thing. So they saw the concealed world. The concealed world was infinite. That's what they saw. Moshe had to move them from there. Why? Because the role of the person in this world is not just to bask in the spirituality. That's why it's only faith. It's not joy yet. It hasn't yet been really revealed. The concealed world is still concealed. You have to work very hard spiritually, you have to work hard intellectually, and you get to something, but in the end, that's not what Hashem wants from you. What does He want? He wants you to go. Go where? Vayasa. He wants you to move. He wants you to take a journey. He wants you to be in the revealed world. He wants you to work here. You say, but what about those great revelations that I just had? He says, that's only a taste. That's a preview. If you really want it, it has to be egalitarian. It has to be for everybody. So if you really want to pursue this, figure out how to show this physically. Whatever you saw spiritually back then because you went up to a higher plane, figure out how to show it from nature. Figure out how to show it from the body. Figure out how to show it as something that every person will understand. And that's what you have to do. And that's called the name of 42. Because 42 are the 42 journeys that they had.
Whose name is 42?
So where does this name 42 come from? It comes from, we said in coming out of Egypt, it was the 3 hands, because 3 times Yudad is Membet, but the real origin is in creation. It's the first 42 letters of the Torah. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, v'haaretz hayta tohu vav, until the bet of Vavohu. It's 42 letters. And then you do all kinds of transmutations on them. It doesn't matter. Really, it's working backwards. They first knew the name of 42. I don't know where they knew it from. No clue. I haven't been able ever to trace the real origin. But this is the name. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Yud, Taf, Tzadik, and so on. And then I think they worked backwards. How can you get it from the first 42 letters of creation? Why? Because they wanted. It's not that it's not true, but I don't think that's the source. The source was, I think, somebody had an inspiration and saw it, or it was given by Moshe Rabbeinu. I don't know. I don't know where it came from. But the point is, why connected to the creation? Because the name of 42, when you say like journeys in reality, when you say that I'm in the physical world, I'm in the world of creation. The world of creation and down is where these journeys occur. This is where the physical, this is where the metal meets the road, or the rubber meets the metal, or whatever the saying is. Okay. Since I'm not coarse enough, so I don't understand this fully. But you connect it to the physical world because to the Bereshis, to creation, because you're saying this is the name of creation. Membet also stands for Maaseh Bereshit. Okay. That's another allusion to it. So whenever you're saying 42, you're saying that this is connected to reality. So they were in the name of 72 and they moved to the name of 42. What's the name of 72? So we said already, it's these 3 verses. By the way, it's very rare. There are only two times in the entire Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, that we have 3 verses, 3 consecutive verses, one after the other, that have the same number of letters. It only happens twice. This in our parsha is one place, and they're pretty long, 72 letters each. And the other place is in Parshas Kitisa, just a little bit later, also in the book of Exodus. And there it's just before the 13 measures. Sorry, I made a mistake. It's something else entirely. The other place is in Genesis, in Vayishlach, and there are 3 verses just before the kings of Edom that have, I don't remember what the number is. I think it's 58. I think they have chen, but I'm not sure. And there are 3 consecutive verses that have the same number of letters. It's only twice in the entire, so it's very rare. So that's the name of 72. It comes out of these 3 verses, and you take the first letter, the last letter, and first letter, second letter, and so on. And what does it represent? It represents splitting open. Ayin Bet. That's what it does. So we don't have time now to get into all the nitty-gritty of it, but that's the gist of the whole...
Yafeh.
Okay, so Mem Bet is going back into reality, and Ayin Bet is splitting everything open and seeing something behind the curtain, seeing what's behind the veil. But again, the challenge is to teach everything from physical reality, like you do. So he said one of the simplest tricks is to use stories. Another trick is to use a parable, because basically a story is a parable because we want people to understand what the moral of the story is. Okay. What's the moral of the story you told about Dubai?
Trust in Hashem.
Right, but some people will think that the moral of the story is whatever the Baal Shem Tov said, it's true. So if that's what you got from it, it's better than thinking that the moral of the story is you should go to Dubai and not stay in Bahrain, because some people are going to understand that. And some people are going to understand, oh, he's anti-corona, because his son, he went from England where they have lockdown, and
because they have more corona in Dubai anyway.
Whatever.
I wanted to tell you something before I forget. There's a story in your book. It's about...
Thankfully, it's not my book. Yeah.
Jose of Lublin.
Yeah. The Choize.
And it's 3 stories in a row, followed by a commentary.
Right.
And all about doing tshuva.
Uh-huh.
So where the commentary explaining about what the 3 different stories represent, you have one long paragraph.
Too long.
No, you have one long paragraph. It's almost at the beginning of the explanation of why there's 3 different stories.
Okay.
And then you repeat the same
paragraph
paragraph again
in the next
on the next page.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in the wrong place.
I fixed those things.
Oh. Just tell me it's hard. Trying to be helpful.